The courtroom was supposed to be a place of justice, but today it felt like a stage for mockery. As the judge leaned back in his chair, a smirk spread across his face. He wasn't even trying to hide it. The moment Marcus, a young black man representing himself, began to speak, the judge let out a chuckle, low at first, then growing louder. Some in the room shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged knowing glances. This wasn't the first time they had seen him treat someone like this. Marcus, however, didn't flinch. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He knew the law inside and out, and no amount of condescension would shake him. He had faced worse in his life. This was just another obstacle to overcome. The judge, still amused, leaned forward and said, "All right, let's see what you've got." The way he said it was dripping with doubt, as if Marcus had already lost. But what happened next? No one in that courtroom, especially not the judge, was ready for it. The moment Marcus began laying out his argument, the entire energy in the room shifted. Suddenly, the smirk on the judge's face started to fade. The spectators leaned in, whispering to each other. Even the prosecutor adjusted his glasses, now paying closer attention. Because in just a few sentences, Marcus had done something no one expected. He had turned the entire case on its head. And the judge? He wasn't laughing anymore. The room fell into an uneasy silence as Marcus continued, his voice steady and full of confidence. He didn't rush. Every word was precise, every point backed by solid legal precedent. It was clear he had done his homework, and now the judge's smirk was gone. He shifted in his seat, his fingers tapping against the desk as if trying to find a crack in Marcus's argument. But there was none. The prosecutor, who had been watching with mild amusement at first, now leaned forward, his expression tense. He glanced at the judge, as if waiting for some kind of intervention. But what could the judge do? Marcus wasn't just speaking. He was dismantling the case piece by piece, exposing errors that had been overlooked or, perhaps, intentionally ignored. The people in the courtroom, who had seen too many cases where the odds were stacked unfairly, began to sense something different about this one. A woman in the back, dressed in a simple blue blouse, whispered to the man next to her, "He's got something. He knows exactly what he's doing." The man nodded, eyes fixed on Marcus. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the room. "That's enough," he said, his voice sharper now. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned a page in his notes and looked directly at the judge, his expression unreadable. "Actually, Your Honor," he said calmly, "I'm just getting started." A flicker of something crossed the judge's face, annoyance, maybe even worry. He wasn't used to being challenged like this. He glanced at the bailiff, then back at Marcus, as if searching for a way to cut him off. But the problem was, Marcus wasn't just arguing. He was proving something undeniable. And everyone in that courtroom could feel it. Marcus could see it now, the shift happening right in front of him. The judge, who had been so sure of his authority, was beginning to look uncomfortable. The prosecutor, who had walked into this case expecting an easy win, was gripping his pen a little too tightly. Even the bailiff, usually emotionless, was watching Marcus with quiet curiosity. The energy in the room was changing. But Marcus wasn't doing this for the reaction. He was doing it because he had no other choice. He had spent nights poring over law books, researching every angle, looking for the one thing that would turn the tide in his favor. This case wasn't just about him, it was about something bigger. A system that often dismissed people like him before they even had a chance to speak. And now, here he was, forcing them to listen. He flipped another page in his notes and continued, his voice clear and measured. "Your Honor, according to precedent set in Brown v. State, the prosecution's evidence should have never been admissible in the first place. The chain of custody was broken, and any fair court would have dismissed this long ago." He looked up, locking eyes with the judge. "Unless, of course, fairness isn't the priority here." The courtroom stirred. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. The judge's jaw tightened. "You're walking a fine line, Mr. Carter," he warned. Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm simply pointing out what's already in the records," he said. "If the court would prefer to ignore that, then I suppose I'll have to file a motion to escalate this case to a higher authority." Marcus narrowed his eyes. He had expected pushback, maybe even an attempt to dismiss his claims. But this was something else. The file in the officer's hands wasn't just any case document. It looked official, sealed with a department insignia. Whatever was inside, it was important. And from the way the prosecutor swallowed hard, it was clear. This wasn't something he had planned for. The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping the file open. His face remained expressionless, but something shifted in his eyes. He was reading faster now, skimming lines, flipping pages, as if trying to process the weight of what he was seeing. Then he looked up, and for the first time all day, he seemed genuinely unsettled. Marcus stayed silent, waiting. The courtroom was so quiet that even the smallest movement felt loud. Then the judge slowly turned to the prosecutor. "Would you like to explain this?" His voice, though controlled, had an edge of something dangerous, something that made the prosecutor shift in his seat. A bead of sweat rolled down the man's temple. "Your Honor, I don't know what this is." His voice cracked slightly. The judge's gaze hardened. "You don't?" He lifted one of the pages. "Then why is your signature on it?" A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. The older man in the gray suit raised an eyebrow, as if confirming his suspicions. The prosecutor's hands clenched into fists, his breathing uneven. Marcus didn't know exactly what was in that file, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the only one under scrutiny anymore. The case had just taken a turn no one had expected. And now, even the people who had thought they were untouchable were starting to realize the truth. The walls were closing in, and Marcus wasn't the one trapped inside. The courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. The prosecutor's face was pale, his hands gripping the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. The judge flipped another page in the file, his eyes scanning the words before looking up again. The silence stretched longer than it should have, but Marcus knew it was intentional. The judge wanted everyone to feel the weight of what was happening. Then finally he spoke. "This document contains a record of manipulated case files, false evidence submissions, and unethical conduct by the prosecution's office." His voice was measured, but his grip on the papers betrayed his tension. He turned to the prosecutor. "And your signature appears on more than one of these." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marcus felt his heart pounding, but he kept his face steady. He had come in today fighting to prove his innocence. Now, it was clear this case had never really been about him. It was about something much bigger. The prosecutor stammered, "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding. I didn't personally handle." The judge cut him off with a sharp glare. "Enough." His voice carried a finality that made the entire room go still. He turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Carter, based on the evidence presented, this court finds that your case should have never gone to trial in the first place. Effective immediately, all charges against you are dropped." The tension broke in an instant. A mix of shock, relief, and disbelief filled the room. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. The older man in the gray suit nodded slightly, as if he had expected this outcome all along. Marcus exhaled, but before he could fully process it, the judge turned back to the prosecutor. However, he continued, "This court cannot ignore the overwhelming evidence of misconduct." He tapped the file with a finger. "I will be forwarding this information to the State Ethics Committee for immediate investigation." The prosecutor opened his mouth, but no words came out. The weight of his downfall had landed squarely on his shoulders. Marcus finally allowed himself a small smile. He had won. But just as he turned to leave, something unexpected happened. The officer who had brought in the file approached him, lowering his voice. "You should know," he said, "this isn't the only case like yours. There are more." Marcus felt a chill run through him. He had fought tooth and nail for his freedom, and now he was realizing his battle was only a small part of a much bigger war. As he stepped outside the courtroom, the sun hitting his face, he knew one thing for sure: this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Marcus stepped out of the courthouse and took a deep breath. The air felt different, lighter, freer. For weeks, he had been fighting for this moment, and now here it was. No more accusations, no more waiting for someone else to decide his fate. He was finally free. But even as the relief settled in, his mind kept replaying what the officer had just told him. There were more cases like his. To file a motion to escalate this case to a higher authority. The judge exhaled sharply. This wasn't going how he had expected. He had assumed Marcus would stumble, that he would struggle to keep up. But now, it was clear. Marcus wasn't just defending himself. He was exposing something the court never thought would come to light. Meanwhile, in the audience, an older man in a gray suit watched intently. He had been silent the entire time, but now he leaned forward, intrigued. He had seen many trials, many defendants, but there was something different about this young man. He wasn't just fighting, he was winning. The prosecutor finally spoke, his voice laced with irritation. "Your Honor, we can't allow this to turn into a spectacle. This is a courtroom, not a debate stage." Marcus turned his gaze to him. "I agree," he said calmly, "so let's stick to the facts. Because if we do, you'll see that this entire case is built on a foundation that doesn't hold up." The judge tapped his gavel, but it was clear the balance of power was shifting. What was supposed to be a routine case was now turning into something much bigger. And for the first time, it wasn't Marcus who looked like he was on trial. It was the very system that had underestimated him. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut. Marcus could feel every pair of eyes on him, waiting to see what he would do next. The judge's grip on his gavel tightened, his frustration barely hidden. He had expected this to be over by now. Instead, Marcus had forced the courtroom into a place it rarely ventured. A space where justice wasn't automatic, where questions had to be answered. The prosecutor leaned toward the microphone, his voice sharp. "Your Honor, I move to strike the defendant's last statement. He's making baseless accusations against the court." But Marcus didn't back down. Baseless. He let out a small chuckle, then turned to the audience, addressing not just the judge but everyone watching. "I'm standing here defending myself against evidence that was mishandled, in a case that should have been dismissed from the start. And now, when the facts are inconvenient, I'm the one out of line." A murmur swept through the crowd. Even those who had come expecting a routine hearing could feel it. Something important was happening. The older man in the gray suit in the back nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court." His voice was sharper now, but there was something else in it, something unspoken. A hint of uncertainty. He glanced at the prosecutor, as if looking for a way out. Marcus saw it. He saw the cracks forming. And he knew he had one last chance to break this wide open. He reached into his folder and pulled out a document, holding it up for the judge to see. "This," he said, his voice steady, "is proof that key evidence in this case was tampered with. And I'm willing to bet neither you nor the prosecutor expected me to find it." The judge stiffened. The prosecutor's face paled. The courtroom was completely still, the weight of Marcus's words hanging in the air. Then, for the first time, the judge hesitated before speaking. The balance of power had shifted entirely. And in that moment, everyone knew this case was no longer about whether Marcus was guilty or innocent. It was about something far bigger, something that no one in that courtroom was prepared to face. The judge's fingers twitched slightly as he stared at the document Marcus held up. His eyes darted to the prosecutor, whose expression had turned rigid. The air in the courtroom felt electric, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. But before the judge could respond, Marcus took a step forward, his voice unwavering. "This isn't just a mistake," he continued. It's deliberate. And if we dig a little deeper, I'm willing to bet we'll find a pattern. He let the words hang in the air, watching the reaction unfold. The prosecutor clenched his jaw, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The judge exhaled sharply, his composure slipping. Then, out of nowhere, the heavy courtroom doors creaked open. A uniformed officer stepped inside, carrying a thick file. His eyes locked onto the prosecutor as he walked straight toward the judge's bench, whispering something that made the older man's face darken. The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, it seemed like he was weighing his options, deciding how much control he still had. The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping the file open. His face remained expressionless, but something shifted in his eyes. He was reading faster now, skimming lines, flipping pages, as if trying to process the weight of what he was seeing. Then, he looked up, and for the first time all day, he seemed genuinely unsettled. Marcus stepped out of the courthouse and took a deep breath. The air felt different, lighter, freer. For weeks, he had been fighting for this moment, and now here it was. No more accusations, no more waiting for someone else to decide his fate. He was finally free. But even as the relief settled in, his mind kept replaying what the officer had just told him. There were more cases like his. The thought sat heavy in his chest. He had barely made it out of this one, not because of the system working as it should, but because he had fought against it. How many others had been trapped with no way out? How many had lost everything because they didn't have the resources, the knowledge, or the sheer stubbornness to keep pushing like he had? As he stood on the courthouse steps, a familiar voice called his name. He turned to see the older man in the gray suit walking toward him. Up close, Marcus could see the deep lines on his face, the kind that came from years of experience. "You handled yourself well in there," the man said, stopping beside him. "Most people would have crumbled under that kind of pressure." Marcus gave a small nod. "Didn't have a choice." The man studied him for a moment, then extended a hand. "David Langston, civil rights attorney." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but shook his hand firmly. "You were watching the whole time," he said, more as an observation than a question. Langston nodded. "And I saw something rare. You're not just smart. You're relentless. That's the kind of person who can make a real difference." Marcus glanced back at the courthouse. "I just wanted to get out of this mess." Langston chuckled. "You did more than that. You exposed corruption. You forced a judge who thought he was untouchable to back down. And you made a prosecutor who's been getting away with this for years finally face the consequences." He paused. "What's next for you?" Marcus hadn't thought about that yet. His entire world had been focused on proving his innocence. But now, standing here, he realized he couldn't just walk away from what he had uncovered. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I do know I can't just forget about this." Langston nodded approvingly. "Good, because there's more work to do. If you're interested, I could use someone like you, someone who's not afraid to challenge the system." Marcus hesitated. The idea of stepping back into this fight so soon was overwhelming. But at the same time, something deep inside him knew this wasn't just about him anymore. "I'll think about it," he said finally. Langston smiled. "That's all I ask." He pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to Marcus. "When you're ready, give me a call." Marcus took the card, running his fingers over the raised lettering before slipping it into his pocket. As Langston walked away, Marcus turned to see a small group of people watching him. Some of them had been in the courtroom, others had just heard what happened. A woman approached, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to say, thank you, for standing up to them." Marcus gave her a small smile. "I didn't do it alone." Another man stepped forward. "But you did what most of us couldn't. You made them listen." Marcus looked at the faces around him, people who had probably seen injustice too many times, but never had the chance to fight back. He had walked into that courtroom to save himself, but now, he realized it had become something bigger than him. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Marcus sat on a bench nearby, letting everything sink in. His life had changed completely in just a few hours. He had won his freedom, but more than that, he had discovered something about himself. He had a voice, and he wasn't afraid to use it. A notification buzzed on his phone. He pulled it out to see messages pouring in. People he hadn't heard from in years, strangers who had followed his case online, all reaching out to show support. He scrolled through the messages, feeling the weight of it all. Then, a message stood out. It was from a name he didn't recognize, but the words sent a chill through him. ***, you exposed one. But there are more. If you're ready to keep fighting, I have something you need to see. ***. Marcus stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He had thought this chapter of his life was closing, but now he wasn't so sure. He looked down at the lawyer's card in his hand, then back at the message. A choice lay ahead of him: walk away and try to put this all behind him, or step forward into something even bigger than he had imagined. With a deep breath, he made his decision. He typed a response. ***, I'm listening. ***. And just like that, Marcus knew his fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning.